My sister uninvited me from her engagement party to avoid embarrassing her in front of her fiancé's parents. After I spent 3 months working overtime to pay for her dream Hawaii honeymoon, I canceled everything without warning and ignored their desperate calls. Hey Reddit, my family always saw me as the fixer, the woman with the money, the solutions, the backup plan. But the second I didn't fit their picture, they tossed me aside. Before I tell you how that blew up in their faces, let me start from the beginning. My name's Esther K. Lamoureux, 29, mechanical engineer and the reliable one in the family. It's not a title I ever asked for, but it stuck. Growing up, money was always tight. Dad runs a small construction business. Mom works part-time at a clinic. My younger sister, Emily, was always the dreamer. Travel, big wedding, Pinterest life. I was the practical one who bailed her out when things went wrong. That pattern never changed. Even after I moved into my own place and got a steady engineering job, I was still the woman they leaned on. And honestly, I didn't mind. I like being useful. So when Emily called one night in early March to say Josh had proposed, I was genuinely happy for her. Josh seemed like an okay guy. A bit too quiet, not much of a sense of humor, but he clearly loved her. That's all that mattered. Emily wanted a proper engagement party, but money was tight. Dad's company had lost clients. Mom's hours were cut. I told her not to worry, I'd help. From March through May, I worked my ass off. Overtime, late nights, skipped plans. I even put off buying a car. Every extra dollar went into an Emily fund. By late May, I had enough to do something big. I invited her over for dinner. After we ate, I handed her a folder. First-class tickets to Hawaii, a week at a beachfront resort, and $6,200 in a savings account for spending money. She stared at it, then started sobbing. "You're the best sister ever." Mom and Dad were there too. Dad nodded. Mom said, "That's very generous, Esther." But her smile didn't reach her eyes. A few minutes later, as we were cleaning up, Mom said, "Make sure you dress properly for the party, okay? You know how these things are," and I brushed it off. She's always made little comments like that, but something about the way she said it felt pointed. I met Josh's parents at a family dinner. His mother asked weird questions. What kind of people will be at the party? Will it be very casual? When I mentioned my friend Sam, she said, "Well, we're keeping it small and tasteful." That's when I knew my presence was suddenly something to be managed. A week later, the family group chat started blowing up. Wear a proper suit. Don't bring Sam. Don't make those jokes you always make. It felt less like planning and more like they were managing a liability. I replied with a thumbs up emoji, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. At work, I was dragging. Sam noticed during lunch, "You're working more hours than anyone here. And for what?" "You already paid for their trip. I just want her to have a good day." "Yeah, but you're starting to sound like a bank with legs." He had a point. Despite everything I was doing, it felt like the more I helped, the less they wanted me around. A few days later, there was a pre-party dinner with both families. It was at this mid-range Italian place downtown. Nothing fancy, but everyone was dressed like it was a black tie event. Josh's parents were already seated when we arrived. His mom, Susan, stood up and hugged Emily right away, then shook my hand politely, like I was a business associate. The conversation was stiff at first. A lot of small talk about weather, work, and wedding venues. At one point, Susan smiled and said, "We're really looking forward to keeping this event intimate, just close family, you know." It was a casual sentence, but the way everyone nodded made it feel like a statement meant for me. I didn't respond, just sipped my water and listened. Trying to lighten the mood, I cracked a harmless joke about Josh needing training wheels for marriage. Emily laughed too loudly, then quickly said, "You know, maybe don't say stuff like that at the party." It wasn't rude, but it was the kind of correction you give to someone you're embarrassed by. I felt my face get hot, and I kept quiet for the rest of the dinner. After we left the restaurant, Mom caught up to me in the parking lot. "Esther," she said, adjusting her coat like she was about to say something important, "we just want this party to go smoothly. No drama, no uncomfortable moments. That's all." "I wasn't planning on causing drama," I said. "I know, but sometimes you say things that not everyone understands. It's just easier if you stay low-key." That word easier stuck with me. It sounded like they were preparing for me to be a problem before I'd even done anything. The next weekend, I stopped by my parents' house. While gathering tools from the shed, I heard Mom and Dad talking in the kitchen. "She's just different from the rest of us," Mom was saying. "You know how blunt she gets." "I know," Dad replied quietly. "But she means well. Of course she does. But maybe it's better if she doesn't come. Emily's already stressed about impressing Josh's family." I froze for a second. My own parents, the people I'd bent over backwards to help, were discussing whether I should even be there. I stayed outside for a while, pretending to be busy with the fence, until they stopped talking. When I went back inside, they acted like nothing happened. Dad asked about the game that was on. Mom offered me coffee. I answered like nothing was wrong because I didn't trust myself to say anything without it turning ugly. But something had definitely shifted. It wasn't just the weird messages or the hints anymore. They were planning for me to be out of the picture. They didn't even think I'd overhear. That night, lying in bed, I kept replaying the words in my head. Maybe it's better if she doesn't come. They weren't angry or cruel when they said it. They were casual, like it was a simple, obvious solution. I didn't know what to do with that yet. I wasn't ready to confront anyone, and I didn't want to blow things up before I knew exactly what was happening. But for the first time, I felt like maybe I wasn't part of this family the way I'd always believed, and I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't the last I'd hear about it. The text from Mom came on a Thursday night. "Can you come by Saturday? We need to talk before the party." No explanation, no extra detail, just that. I already had a good idea what it was about. After weeks of suggestions and overhearing that conversation in the kitchen, I knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant chat. I showed up around noon. Emily and Josh were on the couch. Dad was in his armchair, staring at nothing. Mom was standing waiting. "Esther," Mom started. "We've been talking about the engagement party. We think it's better if you don't come." She said it like she was announcing the weather. Emily stared at the floor. Josh shifted uncomfortably. Dad didn't look up. "It's nothing personal. With Josh's parents' crowd, we want to avoid awkward situations. You can celebrate with us another time." I took a breath and nodded. "Good to know," I said. That was it. No yelling, no scene. If this was how they saw me, there was nothing left to argue about. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair and left. No one tried to stop me. Emily didn't even look up until I was at the door. The drive home was quiet. I didn't bother turning on the radio. My mind wasn't racing or replaying the moment. I felt oddly steady. If they didn't want me there, I wasn't going to force myself into the picture. The first thing I did when I got home was cancel everything. The flights, the hotel, the $6,200 savings account, all of it. Took a few hours on the phone and some emails, but by the end of the night, every dollar was back in my account. After that, I walked over to the bookshelf by my living room window. On the second shelf, there was a framed photo of me, Emily, Mom, and Dad from 5 years ago. The last time we'd all taken a trip together. I stared at it for a second, then took it down and slid it into the drawer of my desk. Not smashed, not thrown away, just out of sight. I made a simple dinner, read a bit, and went to bed earlier than usual. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking up to check work emails or think about money. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was peace, something I hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning, my phone was lit up with notifications. 19 missed calls, most from Emily, a few from Mom and Dad, and 2 from a number I didn't recognize, probably Josh. There was one voicemail. I listened to it once. Emily's voice was shaky. "Esther, please call me. Please, we need to talk. Just call me back." I deleted the message and set the phone face down on the kitchen table. Then I made coffee and scrambled eggs, same as I did every Saturday morning. The sun was coming through the blinds and the apartment was quiet. I didn't text anyone. I didn't answer the phone. I just sat there and ate breakfast, thinking about how quickly everything had changed. I'd spent months trying to make sure my sister had the perfect celebration, and now I wasn't even invited. The calls kept coming that day, but I let them all ring out. By the afternoon, I put the phone on silent and left it on the counter. I didn't feel guilty, and I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. They had made their decision. All I'd done was accept it. The day after I deleted Emily's voicemail, the calls doubled. My phone would start buzzing the moment I woke up and wouldn't stop until I went to bed. Most were from Emily, a few from Mom, and 1 or 2 from Dad. I didn't answer any of them. By Monday, the tone of the messages had changed. Emily's were no longer just, "Please call me." They turned into long, rambling apologies mixed with panic. "I know we messed up," one said. "We shouldn't have said you couldn't come. Please, Esther, we just need to talk." Another was shorter. "I'm begging you, call me, please." Mom's messages were different. They were guilt-wrapped in politeness. "I think you're overreacting, Esther." One voicemail started, "Families fight. It doesn't mean you pull away completely." Another said, "We didn't mean to hurt you. This is just one day. You're still part of this family." Dad's were the hardest to listen to. He sounded tired. "Daughter, please just pick up. We can fix this." I still didn't respond. I read the messages and deleted them. At work, things were strangely calm. With all the family drama out of the way, I finally had the headspace to focus on projects I'd been neglecting. On Wednesday, my manager pulled me into his office. "Esther," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I don't know what's changed, but your work the last couple weeks has been excellent. If this keeps up, I think we'll be talking about a senior position by the end of the quarter." It caught me off guard. I'd been so buried in family responsibilities that I hadn't thought about anything else for months. The idea of a promotion, of finally moving forward, felt good. I walked out of his office with a weird mix of relief and regret. Relief that I was finally focusing on myself. Regret that it had taken a family disaster to make me do it. Sam and I grabbed lunch that day. He'd been following the situation from the sidelines and didn't hold back. "So, they're all calling you now?" he asked. "Non-stop," I said. "It's like a full-time job ignoring them." He shook his head. "You're not a bank with legs. They're not upset because they hurt you. They're upset because their plan fell apart without your money." "I know." "Then don't cave. They need to sit with it. If you give in now, they'll learn nothing." It was blunt, but he was right. If I answered the phone now, everything would go back to how it was. Me solving problems, them taking it for granted. By the end of the first week, the calls slowed down. By the end of the second, they almost stopped entirely. It was quiet and it was strange, but it also felt freeing. I started doing things I'd been putting off. I cleaned out my apartment, went hiking on weekends, learned to actually cook. It wasn't about revenge. It was about filling the space they used to take up with something that actually belonged to me. 2 Saturdays later, my cousin Mark texted me about a small get-together at his place. Normally, I'd skip family stuff while everything was still raw, but Mark and I had always gotten along. I decided to go. When I got there, Mark handed me a beer. I took a soda instead, and we sat on his porch talking. He'd heard about what happened from his mom, my aunt. "I'm not going to lie," he said. "I think you're right to stand your ground. I wish I'd done it years ago." "What do you mean?" I asked. "You know how my parents are. Every time they ask for something, I give in. Money, time, whatever. And every time I do, they expect more. It never ends. I thought I was being the good son. All I did was teach them they could walk all over me." Hearing him say that stuck with me. Mark wasn't angry or bitter, but he looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from years of being taken for granted. I didn't want to end up like that. When I left his house that night, I felt more certain than ever that I'd done the right thing. The engagement party happened without me. I didn't ask for details, but I heard through my cousin Mark a week later. Apparently it was fine. His word, not mine. Small crowd, stiff conversations, nothing memorable. Emily had texted me the morning of the party one more time. "Please just come. I'm sorry." I didn't respond. What I didn't know until later was that Josh's parents spent the whole night asking where I was. When Emily told them I couldn't make it, Susan kept pressing. "But she's your sister, isn't she?" "That's odd. Turns out they'd heard I paid for the honeymoon and thought it was rude I wasn't there." The irony wasn't lost on me when Emily finally admitted that months later. But at the time, I didn't care if it went well or crashed and burned. I stayed home, ordered pizza, and watched a movie I'd been meaning to catch up on. No regrets. The next morning, I woke up early and started making coffee. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of the machine. It had been over 2 weeks since I'd spoken to anyone in my family. I figured this might be how things stayed for a while. Then there was a knock at my door. It wasn't a polite knock, more like someone who had been standing there for a while and didn't plan on leaving. I opened the door, and there was Emily. She looked awful. Her hair was a mess. She had dark circles under her eyes, and she was wearing the same sweatshirt she'd had on in an old photo I'd taken of her during college finals. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside and let her in. She walked around for a moment, then turned toward me. "I know you don't owe me anything," she said, "but I need to explain what happened, and I need to say I'm sorry properly this time." I motioned for her to sit down. Emily sat on the edge of my couch, holding a mug of coffee she hadn't touched. She looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. For a while, neither of us said anything. I just waited. Finally, she took a deep breath and started talking. "I need to tell you the truth," she said quietly. "I was the one who suggested you shouldn't come to the party." I didn't react. I think she expected me to yell or walk out, but I just nodded for her to keep going. "When Josh's parents first met you, they made a few comments after dinner," she said. "Nothing direct, just hints. They said they hoped the engagement party would be traditional and elegant. They asked if everyone in the family was the same kind of person." I panicked. I felt like if anything went wrong, they'd think less of me. And instead of telling them to mind their own business, I started thinking maybe they were right. I went to Mom first. I told her I was worried about making the wrong impression, and I asked if maybe it would be easier if you sat this one out. She didn't push back. She agreed almost immediately, like she'd been thinking the same thing. Dad didn't argue either. So yeah, I planted the idea, but everyone ran with it pretty fast. I'd suspected this from the beginning, but hearing her say it hit harder than I expected. "So all those suggestions about what to wear, what to say, that was you trying to make me fit their idea of acceptable." "Yes," she said, "and it was wrong. I know that now." She took a shaky breath and kept going. "I think part of it is that I've always felt like the messy one compared to you. You've got your life together. Good job, stable, responsible. I'm the one who calls for help when I mess up. I hate that I rely on you so much. And when it came to this party, I wanted to prove I could handle everything myself, that I could make everything perfect without needing you." "But you did need me," I said, finally speaking. "You needed me to pay for things. You needed me to make your dream honeymoon happen, and I did it without hesitation. Then you turned around and decided I wasn't good enough to be seen next to you in front of Josh's family." She flinched. "I know. I was selfish. I used you. And when I didn't think I needed you anymore, I pushed you aside. I'm sorry. I wish I could go back and change it." I sighed and leaned back in my chair. "It wasn't just about the party, Em. It was everything. I felt like my worth to you, to all of you, was tied to my bank account. The second you didn't need money, you acted like I was an inconvenience. That's not family. That's a transaction." Emily nodded slowly. "You're right. I hate that I made you feel that way." For the first time in weeks, the conversation felt real. No excuses, no fake politeness, just honesty. That night, after she left, my phone rang. It was Dad. I almost didn't answer, but I figured I'd already heard from everyone else, so I picked up. "Hey, daughter," he said. His voice was quieter than usual. I wanted to say I'm sorry too. I should have stopped this before it got that far. "Why didn't you?" I asked. He sighed. "Truth, I felt ashamed. I couldn't pay for anything. You've done more for this family in the last year than I have, and I hated how that made me feel." I thought staying quiet was easier than admitting it. It was hard to hear, but at least it was honest. We talked for a few minutes, nothing dramatic, just a straightforward apology. The next morning, Mom texted me too. It was short and stiff, but she said she regretted how everything unfolded and hoped we could talk soon. I didn't reply right away. I needed time. 2 days later, Emily came back. This time, Josh was with her. He looked nervous as they stood at my door. "Can we come in?" he asked. We sat around the small dining table. Josh spoke first. "I need to apologize too. I knew what was happening, and I didn't say anything. I was scared of making things awkward with my parents, but I should have stood up for you. I didn't, and I regret it." "I appreciate that," I said. "But if we're going to move forward, things need to change." "What kind of changes?" Emily asked. "No more decisions about me made behind my back. No more fake image stuff to please people who don't even know me. And no more treating me like I'm just here to solve problems. If you want me in your life, you have to accept me, not just what I can provide." They both nodded. Josh looked me straight in the eye. "We understand, and we're going to prove it, not just say it. It wasn't a fix. It wasn't forgiveness. But for the first time since this whole thing started, it felt like a real start. They weren't trying to sweep it under the rug or patch things up with empty words. They were owning what they'd done. And if they really meant what they said, maybe, just maybe, we could build something better than what we had before. But the week after our conversation, things felt different. Not perfect, not magically fixed, but different. Emily and Josh stopped sending long apology texts and started showing me what they meant. The first update came in the form of a short message from Emily on a Wednesday morning. "Hey, just letting you know, we canceled the honeymoon plans. We're going to save for it ourselves and do it later. I think that's the right thing to do." It was only one sentence, but it spoke louder than all the voicemails and messages she'd left before. A week later, she sent another message. "We're opening a separate savings account and putting money in each month. No help needed." That was the first real sign that maybe things were shifting. They weren't trying to smooth things over with words anymore. They were taking responsibility. My parents made changes too. Dad called to tell me he'd sold an old trailer he hadn't used in years and planned to use the money for part of the wedding expenses. Mom took on an extra shift at the clinic. She mentioned it casually, but I could tell it was her way of stepping up without expecting me to carry the weight. 3 weeks later, Emily invited me over for dinner. No big announcements, no family meeting, just a simple message. "Want to come by Saturday? We'll cook." I hesitated for a day, but decided to go. It was the first time I'd seen them since that talk. When I got there, the apartment smelled like garlic and tomato sauce. Emily was stirring pasta on the stove, and Josh was setting the table. There was no awkward silence, no tension you could cut with a knife. We talked about work, TV shows, a movie Josh wanted to see. He asked me about a project I was working on and actually seemed interested. Emily showed me a Pinterest board for wedding ideas and asked for my opinion on colors. Nothing heavy, nothing forced, just a normal, easy evening. When I left, she walked me to the door. "Thanks for coming," she said. "I know we have a long way to go, but I want this to feel normal again." "It's getting there," I told her, and I meant it. Life outside the family was picking up too. 2 months after my manager's first hint, the promotion became official. I was now a senior mechanical engineer, which came with a raise and more responsibility. The day after I signed the paperwork, I went to a used car lot and bought a secondhand Honda I'd been eyeing since last year. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and it felt like a small victory, something I'd earned for myself. Around the same time, Emily mentioned that she and Mom had started attending counseling sessions together. "We've only had 2 so far," she told me one afternoon, "but it's helping. The therapist's been talking to us about boundaries and why we fall into these patterns." I was surprised she'd even considered therapy. It wasn't something our family ever talked about, but it showed she was serious about doing things differently. A month later, Emily asked me for help with the wedding again, only this time it wasn't about money. "Would you mind helping with the logistics?" she asked. "Like figuring out the seating chart, maybe helping with the schedule for the day? I could really use your brain for this stuff." I paused. "You're not asking me to pay for anything, right?" She shook her head. "No, just your opinion, and maybe a few spreadsheets." I said I'd think about it. A week later, I texted her. "I'm in." If I was going to be part of this, it would be on my terms. No silent expectations, no guilt, just me choosing to help because I wanted to. The planning turned out to be more fun than I expected. We spent a couple of afternoons going over details, organizing vendor contacts, and figuring out where to seat the relatives who couldn't stand each other. It felt good to contribute in a way that wasn't about pulling out my wallet. One night, as we were wrapping up a planning session, Emily looked up from her laptop. "Can I ask you something kind of big?" she said. "Sure." "Would you be my maid of honor?" I stared at her, not sure if I'd heard right. "Maid of honor? Are you serious?" "Yeah. I know it's not traditional, but you've always been the person I rely on, and this time I want you there because you're you, not because of anything else." I didn't say yes right away. "I'll think about it," I told her. I wanted to make sure I wasn't doing it just to patch things up. The next day I texted her 2 words, "I'm in." She sent back a heart emoji and nothing else, but that was enough. It was a small moment, but it felt like a turning point. For once, I wasn't the fixer, the problem solver, or the walking ATM. I was just her sister, and she wanted me by her side. By the time spring rolled around, the tone of everything had changed. My parents had stopped hinting about money and started including me in conversations like an equal. Josh's parents were still distant, but they were polite whenever we crossed paths. Emily texted me regularly about non-wedding things, random memes, updates about her job, a new recipe she'd tried. The trust wasn't fully rebuilt. Maybe it never would be exactly like before, but it didn't have to be. What mattered was that everyone was doing their part to make it different. They weren't just saying sorry anymore, they were proving it. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own family. I felt like I had a choice to stay, to help, to be part of it, and that choice actually meant something. The morning of the wedding felt completely different from how I imagined it would months ago. I wasn't stressed. I wasn't angry. I wasn't carrying the weight of anyone else's expectations. I put on my dress, checked my hair once, and drove to the venue with a calm I hadn't felt in a long time. It was a small outdoor ceremony at a park on the edge of town, nothing over the top, but elegant and simple. When I arrived, Josh was greeting guests near the entrance. He waved when he saw me and walked over. "Glad you're here," he said, smiling. "It means a lot." "Glad to be here," I replied. And for the first time, I really meant it. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Emily looked happier than I'd ever seen her, and Josh couldn't take his eyes off her the whole time. They exchanged vows under a small archway decorated with white flowers and string lights. When it was over, people clapped, music started playing, and the tension I'd been holding on to for months finally lifted. At the reception, Dad stood up to make a short speech. He wasn't much of a public speaker, so it was simple and straight to the point. "I want to thank my daughter," he said, glancing at me from the head table, "for everything she's done for this family and for being here today. We're lucky to have her." It wasn't flowery or dramatic, but hearing those words, "we're lucky to have her," meant more than he probably realized. Mom was next. She walked over while people were still eating and gave me a hug. "I know I haven't always shown it," she said quietly, "but I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry for how things went before." I just nodded and hugged her back. No speeches were needed. The fact that she said it was enough. Later that night, it was my turn to speak. I stood at the microphone with a glass of water in my hand and looked out at the tables. "I'm not great at speeches," I started, which got a few laughs. "But I want to say this. Family isn't about pretending everything's perfect. It's about showing up even when things are messy, even when people screw up. We've all learned a lot in the last few months, and I think we're better for it. Emily, Josh, I'm proud of you both, and I'm happy to be here today." People clapped, and I sat back down. Emily reached over and squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Later in the evening, Josh's mom, Susan, approached me near the dessert table. She had that polite smile people wear when they're about to say something uncomfortable. "Esther," she started. "I wanted to say something. I understand there was some confusion before the engagement party." I kept my face neutral. "Confusion. Yeah, that's one word for it." She shifted her weight. "I think Emily may have misunderstood some things we said. We never meant to imply you shouldn't be part of the celebration. In fact, when you weren't there, we thought it was quite strange." I nodded slowly. "Good to know." She hesitated, like she was waiting for me to make this easier for her. I didn't. "Well," she continued, "I'm glad you're here today. Josh speaks very highly of you." "Thanks," I said. That was it. I grabbed a slice of cake and walked back to my table. Josh caught up with me a few minutes later. "My mom talked to you, didn't she?" "Yeah." "She feels bad," he said. "She didn't realize how it all played out. I told her what really happened, and she knows she contributed to it. She's not great at apologies, but that was her version of one." I shrugged. "As long as she doesn't pull that crap again, we're good." He nodded. "She won't. I made that clear." It wasn't some big reconciliation, but it was enough. They knew what they'd caused, and Josh had actually stepped up. That mattered more than whatever half apology his mom tried to offer. At the end of the night, Emily and Josh made one final announcement before everyone started leaving. "We wanted to share some news," Emily said into the microphone. "We paid for our honeymoon ourselves. It took a lot of saving and planning, but we did it, and we're proud of that." The room cheered, and I couldn't help smiling. It was a small thing, but it showed how much had changed. They weren't relying on anyone else. They had grown, and that made me proud too. Before I left, Emily pulled me aside. "I know I've said this 100 times," she said, "but I want you to know I want you in my life, not because I need something from you, but because I want you there, always." "I'll always be here," I told her. "But now it'll be on my terms." She smiled and hugged me. That's fair. Life after the wedding settled into a rhythm I hadn't experienced before. The family felt different. We still disagreed about things sometimes. Mom could still be controlling, and Emily still overthought everything, but it didn't explode into drama anymore. Everyone respected the boundaries that had been set. I started visiting more often, but not because I felt obligated. Sometimes I'd stop by on a Sunday just to have dinner. Sometimes I'd skip a week because I was busy with work or wanted a weekend to myself. Nobody made me feel guilty about it. Things were better, but not everything was easy. Mom had been picking up extra shifts at the clinic for months, first to help pay for wedding expenses, then because she felt guilty about how everything went down. I'd noticed she looked tired whenever I stopped by, but she always brushed it off. "I'm fine, Esther. Don't worry about me." Emily had mentioned it too. "Mom's working herself into the ground," she said. I told her she doesn't have to anymore, but she won't listen. I should have said something sooner. Then, a couple of months after the wedding, something unexpected happened. Mom collapsed at work. It wasn't anything life-threatening, just a mix of overwork, exhaustion, and dehydration. The doctor said she'd been running on fumes for months, and her body finally gave out. She had to spend 2 nights in the hospital for observation. Emily called me from the waiting room. "Can you come?" she asked. "I'm already on my way," I said. When I walked into the hospital room, Mom looked small and tired in a way I'd never seen before. She smiled weakly when she saw me. "I guess I pushed myself too hard," she said. "Looks like it," I replied, pulling a chair up next to her bed. "Maybe try listening to people when they tell you to slow down." She chuckled softly. "I will, I promise." We talked for a long time, about work, about the wedding, about nothing in particular. At one point, she reached out and held my hand. "I'm glad you're here," she said. "I don't deserve how much you care." "It's not about deserving it," I told her. "It's about choosing it." And that was the truth. I wasn't there because I felt obligated or pressured. I was there because I wanted to be. Because despite everything, she was still my mom. 6 months after the wedding, the photo I had taken off my shelf months earlier was still in my desk drawer. One Sunday afternoon, I pulled it out again. It was a picture of all 4 of us on a beach trip years ago, sunburned and smiling, back when things were simpler. This time, I didn't shove it back into the drawer. I set it back on the shelf. Not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because things were honest now. And that honesty made the whole messy, complicated idea of family feel real again. I still had my life, my boundaries, and my independence. But now, I also had a family that saw me for who I was, not just what I could give them. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.